What is elder abuse like? What does it look like? How is it occurring in tribal communities?
Well, actually, right now we're learning quite a bit because there is very minimal response in Indian country. There hasn't been many tribes really taking on this issue. And when we think about what it looks like, there's a lot of similarities to mainstream communities in terms of the different types of violence that's occurring, but there's also some that are very specific to tribes. When we think about how culture gets used and spiritual abuse gets used, and when we think about how people use an elder's access to ceremonies and cultural events as a form of controlling them or denying them an ability to participate. There might also be instances where someone might threaten to put bad medicine on somebody as a form of controlling them, or even put bad medicine on them, or deny them their ability to participate in cultural and spiritual roles that they have in the community. Historical trauma is the multi-generational impact from abuses that occurred in Indian country to tribal communities that transpired over the course of many generations. And when I say many generations, we're talking hundreds of years. And one example in particular is the boarding school era. And that was federal policy from the mid-1800s to the mid-1900s. So we have multiple generations that were raised by institutions. So when you think about what you learn from observing your parents and being raised by a family being wrapped around you, that was missing and absent for many generations, not just one generation or two. And as a result of that, we have elders today that have lived in boarding schools and were raised by that. The other thing that was significant about that was about the level of abuses that took place, the high instances of sexual abuse and physical violence that were perpetrated against our Indian children growing up in boarding schools. So we have multiple generations being raised by institutions and multiple generations experiencing that violence. And as we look at how that plays out today, when we open up elder abuse to talk about and work with somebody who is dealing with a current instance of that, we open up those long-term, deep-seated memories that have had very painful effects on that individual. I think it's extremely hard for an elder to hold their children and their grandchildren accountable. We have a lot of difficulties in our tribal communities where we have grandparents raising their grandchildren. And as a result of those relationships, some of the abuse is taking place. And they don't want to force that child into a system that might be punitive and don't want to do that kind of harm to that person. So they struggle with wanting to protect their child or their grandchild while wanting to be safe.